Hey, what's going on everybody? Well, welcome back to the channel. If you happen to be new today checking out our content, we are truly grateful that you guys decided to stop by and check us out. My name is Chris and this is the Christopher Scott channel, and what we like to do around here is keep fish, and in fact we're standing in my fish room right now, as well as some small mammals such as hamsters, things of that nature, reptiles. We have a few ponds and things of that nature. So like I said, if you're new, welcome, and hopefully you decide to subscribe before you go. For all of my existing subscribers that are back again, thank you so very much because we are truly grateful. Couple things before we get started today. Number one is the shirt that I'm wearing here is my Arowana shirt that I put out some time ago. It is no longer hosted on the website that it used to be hosted on. However, if you would like to get your Arowana or angelfish merch that you can see on the screen here, stay tuned because a new website will be coming, the SUBSTRATE.com. You can visit that now, put in your email address, and you'll get notified as soon as it launches so you can pick up all of your Christopher Scott merch. We're also going to be making some merch for Little Max Robert, as well as you guys were asked in one of my previous videos, my man-made fish video where we picked up the new flower horn, to name our flower horn. Well, a lot of you said Frank, and unfortunately I'm not going to name him Frank, just simply because Frank really belongs to Frank the Flower Horn, which was Joey Mullins, or the King of DIY's flower horn, so we don't want to use that name. There were a lot of different choices that were out there. Megamind, which I believe Joey Slayham has one named Megamind, or did. Now, one of the names that did come out, Fred. I personally like Fred. So, Fred the Flower Horn. There was another one, Big Head. So I decided, hey, we're gonna name him Big Head Fred, and we're gonna go ahead and have him some merch made. So stay tuned for that. We are gonna have Big Head Fred merch coming very soon. That will release on the csbrand.com very soon. The other thing is, Little Max and I went out and got a P.O. box, and you can see that address right above my head right here. However, you don't have to write it down because it's also gonna be in the description of this video and every video going forward. If you would like to send us anything, you are more than welcome to do so at that P.O. box right there. We love seeing the stuff that you guys used to send when we shared a P.O. box with Brenton. So thank you very much, and hopefully we hear from you guys via the mail. What we're going to be focused on today is building a terrarium, and this is going to be my first endeavor at an actual terrarium. Now see, I've built all kinds of crazy things around here on this channel, such as this crazy waterfall tank right here where we fully did the background, scaped it out, all of those kinds of things, as well as the paludarium that we built with Pyrotoad, or maybe the riverbank tank, and even this cool little semi-aquatic turtle setup for our little pink belly side neck and our little musk turtle named Elon. So we've done all kinds of things, but today's video we're going to be, for the very first time, building a terrarium. Now last video we did some moss collection and we built a propagation system for that, which is sitting right over here on the rack. That is technically a DIY bin terrarium setup. It is a full terrarium inside of there. However, we want to do a proper terrarium, and what we're going to be using for that is a nice big glass jar terrarium with a cork top. This is going to be a fully enclosed terrarium, and well, I don't know a whole lot about terrariums other than the research that I've recently done. I've watched a ton of videos, I've gotten tons of inspiration, and I'm still going to mess something up, I'm sure. So what I'm looking for from you guys is, if you know about terrariums, you know about terrarium setups, and if you see anything that I'm doing wrong or that you would do different, any type of criticism or feedback that you want to give, make sure you drop that in the comments, because I love hearing the feedback. I learn from you guys as much as I hope you learn from me. So anything you have to share, please make sure you drop that in the comments for me. So with that, let's take a look at these supplies here. You can see that we're going to be using all different kinds of things today. I do have some inspiration for this particular build. Unfortunately, I can't locate the picture any longer, but I saw one a few months ago when I first started thinking about putting terrarium together, and it was really cool. It was just a moss terrarium, or a mossararium I think is what they call it, that had some cool stone or slate steps up it, and then there was like a flat area. It was a really cool look, and I've kind of got this mental picture of what I want it to look like. I just wish I could find that picture so I could give credit to the person that inspired this. However, I don't know, I can't find it. I should have saved it. But With that, guys, let's go ahead and get into this build today. The first part of this build is we need to go ahead and create what's called a drainage layer or a false bottom. And I'm using the method that Serpa Design uses for his false bottom in his terrariums. So what we're gonna start with is I use this weed barrier that you can get at any normal everyday hardware store. You can get it at Walmart, you can get it all kinds of places. So all we want to do is just cut out a piece that's a little bit larger than our actual container here. So you have something like this. Now to create our false bottom, what we're going to be using is just some standard pea gravel, and this pea gravel is not clean. So this pea gravel happens to be clean. So what we're gonna do is just start by putting some pea gravel on the bottom of the terrarium. All right, so now that we have a nice layer of gravel down here, and you want this to be about 1/2 to 3/4 of what your actual substrate's gonna be. Now that we have this down, we're gonna go ahead and brush this out and just get it nice and flat. We'll take this little piece of cloth that we cut out earlier and get this pushed down in here, just like that. So our next element is going to be some activated carbon. Now you can use activated carbon or charcoal, and we'll talk about why that is in just a moment, but first I need to go wash this. Now the purpose of the activated carbon is this is actually gonna provide some chemical filtration for you, and this is gonna keep the soil from basically turning into a nightmare of bacteria. So what will occur is every time the water drains through here, it's going to filter it through this activated carbon. So we want to get a good layer of the activated carbon down in here, and then just start spreading this around. We just want it to be flat up against these edges where it will hold the weed barrier in place. So what we have here is this false bottom, and now what that means is this is where your water inside of this closed terrarium is gonna sit. So when we first water this, the water is going to seep down through the soil. It's gonna filter through this activated carbon, go through the mesh, and end up down here just sitting in the bottom. What this allows is it keeps the water from constantly hitting the substrate, which can make the substrate rotten essentially. And what you've done is you've created a semi-water cycle. So the water will sit down here, it's going to evaporate up into the terrarium, it'll condensate on the inside of the glass, and then basically precipitate down over top of your plants and those types of things, keeping everything nice and moist, keeping the humidity high, those types of things. So now that we have our carbon in here, we need to go ahead and start adding our soil. So our soil layer, we're actually gonna use a combination of a couple of things. We're gonna mix up some terrarium mix, and this recipe you can actually find on Serpa Design's channel, but it's a mixture of potting soil, a little sphagnum moss, some reptibark, and cocoa fiber. It really holds moisture very well. So we'll start out with just a little bit of the potting soil. We're gonna add a little bit of this cocoa fiber to it. All right, now that I have this mix completely mixed up, if you would like the recipe for this jungle mix or terrarium mix, I'll put a link to Serpa Design's video on where I learned how to make this stuff down in the description below, so check for that. Now that we have this mixture finished, what we want to do is go ahead and start putting this in right over top of our activated charcoal. And we're just going to sprinkle this around, getting it nice and covered. And this will be our initial layer before we start actually kind of scaping this terrarium. I'm going to use a few different elements for this particular scape. And what we are going to be using is some slate chips. And these slate chips I actually just created myself. If you go to a local hardware store, they sell slate flooring, comes in a 12 by 12 tile. Throw that thing up straight up in the air, let it hit the ground, and it will bust into a bunch of pieces. And then you can easily chisel this stuff away just using a hammer and a chisel. And you can make these kind of the shape that you want, and that's kind of what I did with this. So what I'm gonna do is I want to start kind of building up a little walk path, if you will, using these slate chips that I have here. Now that I have a lot of this substrate in here and I've put this rock in here, now I'm just going in and brushing back all of this potting soil. I want to kind of see what the overall look is, just to make sure that the aesthetic is there that I'm kind of looking for. Now I'm just kind of compacting the soil just a little bit. All right, guys, well, we have the overall hardscape done. And if you kind of notice, we have this staircase that goes up using slate flooring all the way up to the top. And then we have a moss rock right here, just the face of the moss rock right here with some land area up here. And then we have some just pea gravel down here in the bottom, just to kind of give it a nice aesthetic. Now that the overall hardscape is done, what I want to come back and do now is start planting stuff in here. And what we're going to be planting is some of this moss that we picked up during our last video. There's a couple of other elements that we're going to add to this as well, and I'm going to go get one of those right now, and it happens to be in my yard. So the first thing we're going to be adding is some of this pennywort, and the reason I got this out of my yard instead of my moss box, I went in and cleaned this stuff off, is because I noticed this growing just the other day, and it's a little smaller than what we picked at the creek the other day. So I want to use some of this instead. I'm trying to think if I want to put it over here, like next to the steps maybe, or if I want to maybe have it hanging off this side on the steps. I haven't really decided yet. I'm gonna have to look at this and kind of see. Actually, I kind of like it right there. So we may just go ahead and leave it right there. So I'm just going to take my fingers and start pushing this stuff down into the potting soil and kind of covering up the roots with the potting soil. This stuff will take root pretty easily. What I'll do is just come back and brush some of this potting soil over it and kind of tuck it down in there. And then what will happen is when I come back and spray this down, a lot of this potting soil will come off of this. Next thing I'm going to be adding is this, I don't even know what kind of moss this is, to be honest with you, but it's super cool looking, and I want to kind of add some up here on the top. Kind of like right up in there. Maybe like that right there. And actually I was wrong. This is not pennywort that was in my yard. This is actually called, a common name for it is Carolina ponyfoot. It also grows well in a terrarium. Now this particular plant is something I found the other day. This is called common purslane. It also does really well in high humid areas. So we're gonna put this in here, and this is gonna kind of be our foreground plant that'll sit right in here. Another thing that we have is yellow wood sorrel, which kind of looks like clovers. And in fact, if you notice right here, these new green leaves, this is all new growth since I put this into our bin terrarium. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm actually going to place this right up here at the top of these stepping stones and just push this stuff down inside of the substrate, because that will actually begin to grow and flow down these steps as well. Whereas the pony's foot over here will kind of come down the side, and these clovers will start to just grow out. So this is some sort of a carpet moss. I'm not really sure what this is, but we're gonna line the sides of the stairs with this. Kind of starting up here at the top. I just wanna get some of this stuff pushed up in here. This is like a moss that I found growing on a rock actually. So it'll do really well on these stairs. And I don't want a ton of it because I don't want to completely cover the stairs with it. But I do want it to start kind of growing like in the cracks and crevices of these stairs. Kind of like that. You can kind of see that it's lining the stairs right here. We're going to put another little piece right there. Actually, this isn't even the same kind of moss, but we're going to go ahead and add it, because that's what happens with moss, is you find it in all different species everywhere throughout the woods and nature. So we'll just add that right there. So since this rock is actually a moss rock, what better thing to do than start covering it with moss? And the hope is this stuff takes a hold and will start to grow all over this rock. So we're gonna tuck some of this up here, and we're just gonna keep packing this stuff on here. I'm gonna take this big piece of moss out real quick because I wanna plant this right here back up in here. This is called a sensitive plant, and it's a type of vine. I found this the other day. I planted this in the bin terrarium and it has taken off. Now the cool part about this plant is it will actually close its leaves up when you mess with it, so we'll probably see that happen. This thing has been doing really well, so I want to go ahead and use it. In fact, you can kind of see right up in here, it is starting to close up. I'm just going to push this down into the potting soil really well. That way it can start to root. And then what we'll do is we'll just come back and put a nice big piece of moss right back in here where it was. And this mimosa vine can continue to just grow right out here. There's actually some new growth on it right there. That new growth is closed up completely because I'm messing with it. Now, I think the final thing is I need to go ahead and clean this thing up by spraying everything down really well. We're also gonna go ahead and make this thing bioactive, and I'm gonna add these orange isopods, and they are on this little piece of cork round that was inside of the bin terrarium. We're gonna bring them over into here and give them a nice little home in here, and they'll help keep the decaying matter that ends up in this terrarium taken care of. Things like the plants, the moss, all that kind of stuff, any of the leaves. Well, now that we've sprayed this thing down really well, it is time to go ahead and clean this glass up and take a closer look at this thing. Alright guys, well hopefully you went on to enjoy this video. This thing turned out epic, and I have to give thanks to the creators that make terrarium style content because I've learned so much over the last couple of months, especially from Serpa Design. I mean, that dude is a master at his craft. And listen, I'm a true believer that everybody on this planet has something that they can teach me. I am not the smartest person in the world, and I love to learn, so everybody can teach me something. That includes each and every one of you. So if you know about terrariums or anything like that and there's something I should have done differently, I'd love to hear that from you. Make sure you comment that below because I'm always looking to learn. I also love sharing knowledge, and that's what I try to do in a lot of my videos. So if you happen to learn something from this video, then hey, I did my job and I did it well. With all that, guys, thank you so very much for each and every one of you for all the support that you give us. Like I said in the beginning of this video, we now have a P.O. box. If you'd like to mail us anything, you are more than welcome to do so. You can find that in the description below, as well as make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all of those places. Socials are down below. And once again, make sure you visit thecsbrand.com, sign up for the mailing list so you do not miss when our website drops, where you can pick up the Christopher Scott merch, the Max Robert merch, the upcoming Big Head Fred merch, all of that stuff. But with that, guys, we will see you next time.